Discord, web links. Pat. Rian, https skeptical smiley face www. Pat. Rian. Com Keanu_Eugene. Or just search Keanu_Eugene on the site. QUIRK, Hand of God, the Ope-Ope No Mi from One Piece, Trafalgar Law's Devil Fruit. This quirk has a lot of different abilities, but if you're here I assume you have some idea of what it is, or you're just ready to be pleasantly surprised. If you've read my first story, Elementalist in a Dungeon Danmachi fanfiction, which is on this site, then you should already know I like longer plots instead of rushing through things, and I love foreshadowing things, dozens or 200 chapters in the case of Elementalist in advance, so be ready for that instead of demanding all the answers at once. No idea if there will be any romance at all, but if you have a request feel free to comment on this chapter somewhere. We will be following canon, until we aren't, and since MHA is in the final fight of the series at the time of me beginning this project, don't expect me to follow canon exactly. There will be changes to the structure and original missions plots. I like to keep OCs to an absolute minimum because that's not really why we read fanfiction in my opinion, and I'll do my best to keep everyone in character with the main series. Not sure if I'll keep Deku with the multiple quirks or not, depends on how the series ends and if I think that's necessary for this story. Most of my readers are from the West, so I'm using USD for everything. I'm not doing math every time I need to price something from Japan. Alright, that's enough talking. I hope you enjoy the story. 23 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 001, Doctor and Adventurer. I recommend reading the auxiliary chapter, World Info, before starting the story. Discord, web links. Pat. Rian, Keanu_Eugene. Chapter start. Japan, Tokyo, Flevent Street, the Heart Clinic. Approaching midnight, the streets in this area were always bustling. In the most crime-riddled area of the capital city, with gangs and villains always roaming about in the shadows, these streets were never safe. All but one place, that is, the Heart Clinic. A 3-story apartment building owned by a young couple who moved here a few years ago, transforming this building into a lifeline for the dregs of society. The one place where villains, gang members, and anyone who simply couldn't use legitimate means could go to get anything from a few stitches to a full surgery properly done, no questions asked. Because of this, the entirety of this particular stretch of Flevent Street is considered sacred ground. Any gang or villain who causes problems in this little area suddenly has to deal with every criminal from miles around hunting them down. Because nobody wants the only doctor that doesn't ask questions to skip town because of stray bullets flying too close to them. The small sign on the door, a white square with a curved heart outline in black, that's the only lifeline people in this area have, and they're willing to kill to protect it. Sitting on a clean metal chair, a plain-looking Japanese woman leans back with her eyes closed as her doctor works on her. Her top was already in the bin to be burned, soaked in blood from the 2 bullet holes in her left side, at the very edge of her torso, barely missing anything important. "Never thought I'd see you bleed," the doctor said. A thin Caucasian Italian man with blonde hair and a pronounced smile. Patiently and expertly working on the woman. Kiku the Untouchable finally takes a hit, he jokes bitterly, much to her annoyance. "Had to happen eventually," she says weakly, "that's why I married a doctor." He chuckles quietly in response, "Knew you kept me around for something. But I didn't think a judge had guards that could hit you, what happened?" He asks while passing her a glass of whiskey. "The judge didn't," she pushes away the glass and leans back into the chair. "Got a message from Redestro on the way back into the country, open contract on the Yaoyorozu head, couldn't pass on a paycheck like that," she says with a bitter smile. So the son finally got sick of the old man not playing along. "Something had to give, and we got paid," Kiku says. "So Yaoyorozu's guards." "Makes sense, that much money, the old man could have hired anyone. They were better than most, still garbage." "They hit you," he pokes. "They weren't good," she snaps for a moment before calming down. "I was distracted, got some news this morning, that's all," she says quietly. "Well, I hope it was worth it," he finishes stitching her up and bandaging her side. "2 more inches to the side and I would have lost you." "Lost us, you would have lost us," she corrects the now stunned doctor. Freezing for a moment, Corazon silently pulls Kiku in for a tight hug. "We're having a baby," the young doctor announces happily. "Ow ow ow ow." The woman pushes him away. In his excitement he forgot about her new wound. Sorry, he quickly holds out a hand to her and activates his quirk. Blue light radiates from his hand and passes through her body, barely large enough to cover her wound, delivering all the information about her physical state into his mind. "How is it?" Kiku asks. You'll be fine. He moves the light over to her belly and focuses extra hard for a few seconds. And you'll be fine too, he says to his undeveloped child. End chapter. 34 comments 0 vote. Chapter 002 La Matani. Read auxiliary chapter world info before starting the story. Discord. Web links. Pat. Rian, Keanu_Eugene. Chapter start. -4 years old. I feel different. But nothing's happening. La mutters sadly. At 4 years old and only ever being homeschooled by his parents, the extremely sheltered and protected La Matani was shirtless with unkempt short hair, waving his arms around and punching the air, trying and failing to activate his quirk. His father Dr. Corazon taps his chin and studies the child. Hold still, he says before reaching down and using his scanner quirk on La. Your body changed, you certainly have a quirk factor and more mitochondria per cell than you did yesterday. Try this. Corazon places his hand out with his hand facing La, slowly flowing through the motion of activating his quirk. La copies the motion and focuses, but nothing happens. As he's about to cry, his father speaks up. Maybe you got Kiku's quirk, do this instead. Corazon swings his hand in a rock-paper-scissors motion. Copying his father, La does the action and is disappointed to find his hand hasn't changed into a weapon like his mother's. He's seen his mother training before. With her arsenal quirk she can reshape her limbs into weapons, everything from swords to high-power rifles with high-tech scopes. Getting frustrated, La continues shaking his hands up and down, waving them around more and more angrily. Seeing his son about to cry, Corazon frowns and reaches out, holding the boy still and seizing his attention. La, that's enough, Corazon says. But, my quirk. My quirk. It doesn't matter what your quirk is, his father says. You're my son and that already makes you better than everyone else, even if you were quirkless that wouldn't change. But, La stares down at the floor and balls his fists at his sides. You and Mom are always using your quirks, I wanted to be like that too, to help you too. HMPH, Corazon smiles proudly at his son. If that's all you want, then you certainly don't need a quirk. It helps, but you don't need it to be an adventurer like your mom. And you definitely don't need it to be a doctor. But it helps, La argues. Yeah, it helps, but no matter how strong a quirk is, all it could ever make you is one of those silly heroes or villains in this society, but even All Might can't reach into hell and bring someone back. Corazon smiles, swelling with pride. But we can do that. He reaches out a hand for his son to take. I can teach you everything I know and make you the closest thing to a god. To be a god, La mutters, mostly to himself, seeing his father in an entirely new light. Reaching out and taking his hand, La gives a joyous smile. Yeah, teach me. He cheers loudly. Ha ha ha, Corazon picks his son up and twirls him around. I'll start planning all the extra lessons you need from tonight. La's joyous mood immediately becomes shocked. And so the road to being the world's best doctor began. -5 years old. Are you really qualified to be doing this? A man covered in scrapes and bruises asks La. Sitting on a metal chair, the young boy is carefully removing half a dozen bullets from the man's leg. Don't talk, La says through his surgical mask. Wearing a smaller version of hospital scrubs and a surgical mask, looking like a kid playing dress up as he carefully removes the first bullet. I'm just not sure how comfortable I feel with The man screams out in pain as La presses his thumb onto the now empty bullet wound. I said shut up, the child snaps at his patient, earning a sheepish look from the grown man as he goes back to work. I don't want a bank robber with super speed who somehow got shot questioning my competence. The man just looks away, feeling the sting from the child's words. Ha ha ha, Corazon laughs as he pulls the antibacterial curtains aside and enters the work area, wearing the same outfit as his son. That's right, gotta keep these patients in line, the man says as he moves to take a seat not far away. Having just finished with his own patient, a member of the same heist team who also got shot, he's now here to check on his son. Are they gonna be okay? The patient asks Corazon. You morons will be fine, Corazon casually waves away the man's concern. That new hero showed up, snipe. Yeah, the man mutters. His bullets home in on targets, pretty much beats my speed quirk in a dash every time. Hearing both the men converse, La tries to focus on his work but struggles to ignore them. He makes it to the 5th bullet hole and raises his scalpel. Just a little more, he thinks to himself as he cuts down. As he's about to make the last main incision, for the first time his quirk activates. His vision goes blue as if looking through thin glass. Moving the scalpel, he barely shifts a few centimeters, and to his horror, his patient's entire leg is cut off. What? He cries out in shock. The patient doesn't even feel the cut. Where the blood would normally be flowing freely is a seemingly invisible wall, allowing the insides to be seen without disrupting them at all, preventing any pain or real injury. Effectively separating the leg by space instead of truly damaging it. Both men finally notice what's going on as they look on the floor to see the leg just resting there with one more bullet hole that needs attending. The patient is instantly silenced as Corazon immediately pulls out his taser and zaps him unconscious, a handy device for any doctor who deals with criminals. La. The doctor calmly asks, seeing his son frozen in shock at what he'd done. La, why don't you let me deal with this and you get cleaned up? Your mom should be coming home from her job tonight, remember? La lifelessly nods, still in shock, and silently leaves the room. As the child leaves, Corazon picks up the leg and moves it over to an operating table. With no hesitation, he takes out a scalpel and makes 2 large incisions. Seeing the cuts appearing normally, he puts the scalpel down and feels the area where La had separated the leg from the patient. He sees the bone surrounded by all the flesh and muscle, blood still flowing through veins as if the body were still attached. He presses his finger toward the bone, but notices that there seems to be an invisible wall preventing the blood and other pieces from falling out of the open wound. It bleeds normally when I cut it, so he didn't modify the patient's body. The point where it's separated isn't bleeding out and seems to be sealed by some kind of void space. The pulse is still flowing, which means technically it's still connected to the main body as well. What an incredible quirk. As Corazon finishes studying the limb, the patient begins to stir awake, causing the doctor to sigh. Can't have this information getting out, he thinks as he saunters over to a locked cupboard and fiddles with the combination lock. Removing a small syringe of clear fluid, he walks over to the man and stabs him in the jugular. With no emotion in his eyes, he floods his bloodstream with death. Too bad those bullet wounds cracked your spine. You almost made it too, oh well. He shrugs and begins to clean up. Taking the leg, he carries it over to the body, and with no resistance, it reattaches the moment he pushes the pieces together. The division that separated the pieces is entirely gone, as if it was never detached in the first place. His eyes widen in surprise yet again as he feels the area where the separation was. Can't even tell anything happened here, he mutters, clear wonder in his voice. Corazon carefully cleans up while mulling over the quirk he just witnessed. Working with thousands of villains with all manner of quirks, he'd never seen anything like that. A quirk that lets you freely manipulate other people like that, pull them apart, and put them back together at will. All without their consent as well. It really is perfect for a doctor. Corazon smiles, and looks down at his hands. He can't help but laugh as the absurdity sinks in. All these centuries we surgeons were said to have the closest thing to a hand of God. And my son really has the hand of God. His laughter spreads throughout the room. The last thing the dying patient hears as the poison takes effect. End chapter. Waifu votes here please. Noticed nobody made any requests in the auxiliary chapter and I'm still undecided. Have some idea about my story? Comment it and let me know. And thus the God complex begins. His dad begins training him to be a surgeon from super young. Quirk name, Hand of God, because devil fruits aren't a thing here. Keanu_Eugene creators thoughts. 36 comments 0 vote. Chapter 003 The Matani's Last Supper. Read auxiliary chapter world info before starting the story. Discord, web links. Pat. In 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. Chapter start. -7 years old. In the same operating room where La first used Hand of God, lies an unconscious woman, her body missing the top half of her head as the oxygen mask placed over her mouth keeps her unconscious but very much alive. The same invisible barrier of space rests at the point of separation from her body. At the other end of the room at a metal desk sits La with the top of her head still very much alive in front of him. With his father looking over his shoulder, amputate, La commands while he carefully cuts her head down the middle, splitting her skull and brainstem in one swift motion. Once again harmlessly dividing her body. There it is, Corazon says as he points to the blinking little bead attached to her brainstem. Focusing on the bead, La raises his hand in a grasping motion, placing a little vial of water beside the head. He focuses on both the water and the bead. Shambles, he commands. A single drop of water swaps places with the bead, dropping the blinking bead into her vial and placing a harmless drop of water on her brainstem. Releasing a tired sigh, La wipes the sweat from his brow. This was the final surgery of a very long day, the 7th bomb he's removed from a person's head in a row. Looking around, he focuses and sees the bubble enveloping the room. A faint blue tinge hung in the air that was only visible to him. Room, he commands and the bubble seems to pop. Room is the basis of his quirk, all his other techniques must be performed within this operating room, however, some effects will persist outside of this room. The room cannot exist without Law being inside. The size of his room as well as how long it persists is entirely determined by his stamina, there is no other limit. No material can block it, no quirk can resist it, and no other person can perceive it. Shambles is a technique that allows him to freely substitute the positions of any items within his room, effectively allowing him to warp around anywhere he wants as long as there is something to swap with. Working together both men reassemble the woman, quickly undoing the effects of his first technique. Amputate is a technique that ignores all physical resistances and divides space itself to cut matter. This technique does no harm to living things however and can be extended as far as his room reaches, although he requires a bladed tool to use this. After putting the woman back together his father scans her. While less effective than Law's scan technique which can pinpoint anything within his room depending on his awareness, or allows him to target a particular organ within a person if he's making contact while scanning them. Corazon took the lead in the final checkup as Law was already tired from constantly making rooms today. She's perfectly fine, his father said. You know your quirk really is a miracle. Of all the people in this world, I do believe you're the one that can become a god, all these new techniques always showing up. I couldn't be happier, and you're learning medicine so quickly too, now that really makes me proud. I still have a long way to go, I can only operate on certain organs without you supervising me, brain surgery would have been impossible without you, Law says. You're still young, you've got time, his father removes his gloves and ruffles Law's hair. Why don't you go see what your mom made for dinner while I deal with this, he gestures to the unconscious woman. Remember we don't want people seeing your face. Right, don't take too long, Law says as he removes his gloves and leaves to get cleaned up. Watching his son leave Corazon looks at the little vial on the desk still containing the explosive bead. Something that would have been impossible to remove without the phasing quirk that placed it there, yeah, you're gonna be on top of the world son. -9 years old. Clang. On a high-rise rooftop in Hosu City Law and his mother, Kiku, clash blades. The professional adventurer, as she prefers to call herself, educates her son in the art of combat while his father handles more academic pursuits. Faster. She demands as she parries another of his sword strikes. Your quirk gives you an absurd boost to spatial awareness, use it and increase your reaction time. You can get it close to zero with enough training. While Law was covered in sweat and panting heavily, she was as calm as ever without a worry on her face. He holds his sword out, a perfectly straight short saber reminiscent of a scalpel, and accepts her challenge while she simply has her right hand in the form of a greatsword and gives him a bored look. Spinning on his heel, Law turns his back to her and slashes forward, slashing at empty space. Shambles, he mentally commands, no longer needing the crutch of saying his intent out loud to activate his quirk. He and Kiku instantly swap places. For the briefest instant, her eyes widen before she spins on her heel and easily parries his strike. Not bad, she compliments while locking blades with him. But this isn't a sword duel, she says before punching him in the face, knocking him onto his back. Ow, he groans while rubbing his face. Kiku sighs and helps him up, dusting him off slightly. Law, in this world the only thing that matters is power. Most of society isn't allowed to use quirks because the people in charge know this is true. They can't control everyone, so I need you to focus more on the combat applications of your quirk for when you need it, alright? Alright. The sooner you learn this the better. In this world there is no good or evil, there are no heroes and villains. The strong decide those things, they decide the labels and rules. The weak don't even get to choose how they die, you have to be the strong, she says in a serious tone. As they take a break, Law walks over to their backpack and takes out 2 burgers, handing one to his mother. Sitting with their legs hanging off the top of the building, they look out over the peaceful midday city. What do you think I need to work on more? Law asks his mom as they're having lunch. She thinks about it for a moment. Well, you're already past the first hurdle. See, most people either don't or can't legally encourage their kids to use their quirk as much as possible, especially not as much as we do because, well, laws. That's usually the first roadblock, and you're comfortable enough to instinctively use your quirk anywhere and anytime. Now you need to work on combat sense and the size of your room. Covering a few buildings won't be enough if shit hits the fan after all. So just keep pushing my limits, I can do that, Law says. Yeah, but have fun too, maybe get a girlfriend. Not that I don't like you being more mature than a lot of people, but what's the point of all the fighting if you end up alone? She leans over and pulls him into a hug. That's why I have you and your dad. I rather just stay in the clinic, La decides. TCH, you're gonna be one lonely god huh, Kiku says as her phone beeps. That's our signal. Raising a hand to her face she covers both her eyes. Activating her quirk her hand seems to flatten before two holes appear, one in her palm and the other in her fingers to form high-powered scopes. Looking at the city below she sees her target. A tall and bald man in a three-piece suit with bodyguards surrounding him. Walking at his side is his trophy wife with their 5-year-old daughter between them holding both their hands. Gotcha, she says. Pass me around. Without looking La reaches into their day pack and passes her a 4-inch long .50 caliber bullet. Thanks, she says as she holds it in her hands. Making a squeezing motion both her arms shift and twist into a massive rifle with a high-powered scope. Contract calls for this to be messy, oh well, she says as she aims. Can I get the next one? La asks. She considers it for a moment, what the hell, you're already 9, gotta get your feet wet at some point. Yes. He cheers, finally feeling like he'd be able to really contribute to her work. Just in case, and I'll be choosing all your targets alright, can't afford any slip-ups, she takes a deep breath. 1,500 meters on a crowded street in broad daylight, you know what most people call that? Asks says as she exhales. Impossible, La says, but for us, it's just another Monday, he laughs. Damn right. Focusing her mind she gently squeezes the trigger, firing between her heartbeats to silence her targets. With no issue the bullet tears through the air in one of his guards before hollowing out the man's chest in front of his family, painting them all red. Watching through his binoculars La doesn't even flinch, over the years of being a surgeon in her spotter he's quite used to the sight of blood. As the round is released the bullet shell pops out of her rifle as her hands shift back, slight red spot on her forearms from the heat of the shell. Tact, La catches the casing before it falls to the streets below them and stores it in their backpack. TAKT is his equivalent to telekinesis or gravity control, although it operates more vaguely as simply manipulating space, allowing him to even move liquids or simply command it in an area to raise a pile of sand instead of focusing on every grain. However, larger objects need more specific focus and consume more energy. He also cannot directly move himself with this technique. Placing a hand on her shoulder arm where the injury is he focuses on her, booster shot. She feels a small adrenaline surge as he removes his hand, and the sore spot completely heals as if it were never there. Booster shot was a more recent development, allowing him to convert his own stamina into healing for others, or to use it on himself to heal. If he uses it on a person or himself without needing any healing, it instead gives a physical boost proportional to the stamina consumed. Getting ready to leave the roof as sirens start blaring and heroes rush to the scene, the duo casually enters the elevator and descends to the lobby. Kiku still rubs where her arm was stinging from the recoil and heat, thankful for her son's healing technique. Unlike Lady Nagant, while Kiku can make any weapon her flesh is only reinforced to a certain extent, she also can't separate body parts, therefore, making and firing ammunition is impossible with only her quirk, which leads to her preferring close-range fights overall. So your birthday is coming up, anything you want? Kiku asks as they walk down the street, ignoring the fleet of emergency vehicles passing by. Obsidian scalpels, maybe a new sword. La answers immediately. Kiku sighs, sure, but how about you also pick something outside of medicine or training? I know those are your first loves but it's okay to branch off a bit and have fun. La ponders it for a minute as they round the corner to their car. What about a skateboard? Obsidian scalpels, a new sword, and a skateboard, that's easy enough, Kiku muses as they make their way home. -15 years old. La had grown up quite a bit in the last few years, they suspect the mutations in his body extra mitochondria in each cell are what caused his height to shoot past both his parents. While they both stood at 177 centimeters -5 feet 10 inches, La was already at 183 centimeters, just a hair over 6 feet tall. His body was well defined, muscular but mean, clearly he was someone who enjoyed weightlifting but could also go for a long run whenever he felt like it. His skin was slightly tanned, an extremely light brown hue, partly his natural complexion, and partly from how he spends his free time. But likely the most startling feature is the bluish-white eyes that seem to look past everything in front of him. Sitting around the dinner table La gladly digs into his katsudon, a deep-fried pork cutlet on a bed of fried eggs atop a spread of white rice. Beside his plate is a small glass of whiskey. Both Kiku and Corazon have the exact same meal, a birthday and holiday tradition in their little family. Which is why they were eating it tonight, April 3rd, La's 15th birthday. This is what they ate the night they made La and started their family, so they decided it should become a tradition. So who is she? Kiku asks. La chokes on his rice for a moment, reaching for his glass to wash it down. What? The girl you snuck out of here this morning, she forgot her jacket, Kiku says with a bored look. Just some girl I met a few days ago, it's nothing serious, La says. Another useless pretty face huh, why can't you just find a nice girl that you'll actually keep around for a change? Kiku berates him. Why would I ever do that? I'm 14 and I've got money and power, that means the world is just full of options for me, La boasts. You sound just like your father, but he changed his tune when he met the right woman, Kiku says with a prideful smile. Corazon nods. Then I started a family and it was honestly the best thing to ever happen to me. Have you at least considered taking the actual medical license exam? Kiku asks. You know we have connections to get you in there, you'd easily pass and then we'd actually have a trusted license in the house, maybe even make the clinic legit. I don't know, I don't think I want to get involved in government stuff. What we're doing now works so why change it anyway? I'm just suggesting options, you've got your whole life ahead of you still no need to choose now, Kiku says. Well. La trails off nervously, there actually is a job I was looking at. Both his parents give him a strange look before his father speaks, what job? A simple hit. La, Kiku narrows her eyes at him. We've been over this. I've been watching you for a decade, studying constantly and practicing, just let me do one for once, he argues. Narrowing her eyes at him Kiku silently considers all their options. If I say no will you do it anyway? Yeah. Sigh, did you properly check the sources? Of course. Where is it? Only one district over. Target. Some lawyer, works for an oil company. Pay. $2 million, La says. Kiku frowns and looks over at her husband. Corazon shakes his head, if he's going anyway then I'd feel better with both of you there. Damn it, fine, when? He has a case tomorrow afternoon. End chapter. Pat. In 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. Still open to suggestions and ideas for this story since only the first volume is completed. 29 comments 0 vote. Download the app for greater interaction. You can chat with me about my writing experience apart from the comments section. Keanu_Eugene. Download app now. AN. Upload schedule, every weekday. Discord, web links. Pat. In 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. 4 comments 0 vote. Chapter 004 Ambush. Read auxiliary chapter world info before starting the story. Discord, web links. Pat. In 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. Chapter start. La stood in the hotel room staring out the large windows. 15 floors up all he has to do is make one precise shot and this job would be done. On the bed rests his sword, a sleek 120 centimeters -4 feet long white saber, completely straight and razor thin, custom made to simulate the feel of a scalpel, a tungsten carbon alloy perfect for his needs. The hilt was rectangular and matched the blade perfectly, white with black accents. You ready? Kiku asks. Of course, La takes his sword and draws it from the white scabbard. Lining it up with a painting on the wall he activated his quirk. Room. A tiny invisible room reaches the painting but no further, just barely touching the ink. Injection shot, he says quietly. Lining up the blade to where he wants, a bullet of invisible force slams into the ink but goes no further than his room's limits. You really got all the good stuff. His mom mutters. An invisible and silent bullet, perfect for these types of missions as it can either harm inorganic objects, no matter how physically tough they are, or bypass physical defenses and do exclusively internal damage to organics. Your stuff isn't bad, Mom. I'm just that much better, he says with a cocky grin. Oh yeah. Ack, she smacked La on the head. All right. As La frowns and rubs his head Kiku looks at the wall clock, it's almost 5, he should be leaving the office soon, get ready. Right, La walks toward the tinted window as she hands him a pair of binoculars. Looking down at the crowded street. 2 lanes of light traffic but dozens of people on the sidewalk, either going home or to their evening plans. Focusing on the door he expects his target to be leaving soon. La keeps his eyes locked, ready to activate his quirk and get another clean job under his belt. Breakdown. Kiku asks over his shoulder, her eyes transformed into high-powered scopes to help locate the target. Mom, you know duh. Don't care, she cuts him off. Doesn't matter how many jobs you've done, always good to double-check everything. Breakdown. Now. La sighs, fine. Early 50s, gray suit, blue tie, has 3 horns on his head. Quirk. Horns, he has horns, Law says in a bored tone. Kiku nods. Family. Doesn't matter. Reason for the hit. Doesn't matter. Payout. 3 million, Law smiles. Good, the only thing that matters is the contract, nothing is more sacred in this life, Kiku smiles, knowing this rule was properly instilled into their son years ago. Look lively. Law spots his target simultaneously, a short and rotund man, barely 150 centimeters 5 feet tall. Wearing a gray suit with his blue tie, and sporting 3 horns. The face perfectly matches the picture in the request. Looking at the people walking about, Law spots a gap in the foot traffic, the perfect spot for him to get his shot. Easy money, Law says. Room. A massive room, spanning over 100 meters, invisible and undetectable as always, expands outward from his chest to encompass everything. Creating his domain, with him at the center of it. Shambles, a butterfly knife appears in his left hand, without needing to swap places with anything. Familiarity with an object or space allows him to warp them without requiring the crutch of a substitution item. This would be a lot easier if hotel windows could open, Law sighs as he makes a slicing motion in the air. The lock at the edge of the window is sliced open, a perfect and routine use of amputate to divide matter. Law places the tip of his blade just outside the window to prevent any bullet holes when he fires. Scan, his mind is bombarded with information about everything within his room, but he only focuses on his target. Scan gives him a perfect external breakdown of his target's body and passive awareness of everything within his room to an extent, but the larger the room the easier it is to miss things. And gathering information about a person's internal structure requires him to be in contact with the person, even if it is through gloves. Almost there. Law says as he focuses, aiming his blade directly at the target. Injection shot, he mutters. A silent force bullet rockets from the tip of his blade and crosses the street, clearing the distance in half the time it would take for a standard bullet while remaining completely silently and invisibly. They both see the target get hit, a direct shot to the side of his head as he's walking. Shattering his brainstem and killing him instantly, the sidewalk at the other end of the man cracks as a bullet hole suddenly appears in it. As if it went clean through his head. But without ever breaking the skin. As always, internal damage only to organics. Easy Joe, Law celebrations are cut short. As expected, the surrounding crowd looks on in horror as the mall falls to the floor. But both Law and Kiku's eyes widen in surprise as his body shifts and contorts. Transforming back to its original form, a brown blob of flesh, clothes and all shift with it. A moment later it truly reverts to the original form. A tall slender man with pale gray skin laying lifeless on the sidewalk. Shifter, Kiku's eyes widen in realization, seeing the shape-shifting hero's corpse laying there. His bulletproof skin is obviously assumed to be able to protect him from them, but the hero couldn't have known about Law, about how his quirk worked. Mask on. She yells. Law immediately shuts the window, and runs to the bed. Reaching into his bag he pulls on his ski mask, leaving only his white-blue eyes exposed. His mother wears an identical mask with her brown eyes revealed. Kiku taps a few buttons on her phone, disabling all the cameras and recordings on their route and prepared exit before throwing the phone onto the bed. Turning to looks back at her son, she nods. Ready? Law asks. Let's go. She reaches into the backpack they brought and clicks a button, leaving it on the bed beside the phone and anything else they brought. Law grabs his sword and focuses on where they need to go. Shambles, he says as they disappear, replaced with 2 blue marbles that clatter to the floor. They appear on the roof of the hotel and begin running along the rooftops, understanding that escape was the main priority before they could do anything else. Boom. As they leap off the roof and onto a neighboring building, the room they were in seconds ago explodes into a raging inferno, destroying all evidence of anyone being there. With only their eyes exposed, they simply had to escape now and lay low for a while. They were certainly impossible to track. Running toward nearly the end of the second rooftop, Kiku stops and grabs her head. Ah! She yells in pain, feeling as if her skull was in a vice. Law stops as he feels a tingling at the back of his mind, but he automatically shrugs it off, the telltale effect of someone trying to use their quirk on him. Thankfully, between his ego, willpower, and quirk, it was impossible for any other quirks to tell him what to do. Kiku, however, without such resistance, drops to one knee due to the extreme pain. On the empty rooftop, Law knows they have no cover and picks her up. Thankfully his mother was shorter and lighter than him, he could barely feel her due to how much energy his quirk gives him. Scooping her into his arms and handing her his sword, he takes off. What is it? He asks. They're tracking me, Kiku says. We need to find the quirk user and kill him, then disappear. And if we can't, We will, Law says. We'll both get out of this. East, he's east, Kiku says as the pain begins fading away, yet she could feel the established connection tugging her toward the quirk user. Law turns on his heel and begins running east. Room, he creates a room as they arrive at the edge of the roof, quickly scanning for a few rocks on a rooftop across the street in front of him. Shambles. They both disappear. You can put me down now, Kiku says as they step out of his room, causing it to collapse immediately. Kiku stands on her own and points to a spot on the floor. I can feel him down. Move. La pulls her out of the way as a sharp feather flies past the spot where she was. Crash. Rooftop rumbles behind them. Turning around, they both see a man in an aviator-style getup landing on the rooftop behind them, two wings of red feathers at his back where the lone feather that tried to attack Kiku returns to. The number 3 pro hero, Hawk, glares at them, a long feather in each hand acting like a sword. Standing beside him is a tall hulk of a man, the ground beneath him cracked due to his rough landing earlier, his massive 2-meter-tall frame was swollen with muscles, and his entirely metal body shone under the sunlight. Chrome, the number 12 pro hero, his armored skin allows him to handle some of the physically strongest villains, and makes him immune to firearms and even tank shells. Hawks looks at both targets for a moment before speaking, and La uses this time to create a room spanning 200 meters, attacks on his stamina that he could truly feel, but making this room and scanning was essential to expect any more ambushes, he'd barely made a room in time to detect that sneak attack earlier after all. If you have a sword, he points at La, then that must make the woman arsenal, he levels his feather sword at Kiku. Did you find him yet? Kiku asks quietly, neither side moves their eyes from each other as both her hands morph into swords, confirming Hawk's suspicions. Yeah, La says. I have his location, plan. Kill them all, they've seen too much. La nods in agreement, focusing on the person she pointed at earlier through the floor. While mother and son were quietly muttering to each other, standing 15 meters away, Hawks and Chrome were creating a simple plan, not expecting the infamous assassin arsenal to have backup. With the sensitivity of his feathers, Hawks felt the vibrations their words sent through the air, easily hearing their plan. They found Mindbinder, he tells Chrome in a hushed tone, still staring down the villains. Don't hesitate to break them, they plan to kill us all. I think the swordsman has heightened senses, you should take him. Piece of cake, Chrome says. Now. Arsenal, Kiku yells. To the shock of both heroes, La turns toward her and swings at her neck with his blade, drawing it and attacking before anyone can make sense of this betrayal. Shambles, in Kiku's place an older gentleman with gray hair suddenly appears, eyes closed and hands on his temple as he focuses to maintain his quirk on the woman, keeping his mind connected to the woman. Before he can open his eyes, they've swapped places and a sword slashes through his head. Incision, La enhances his slash to do more damage, unfortunately, this requires physical contact unlike amputate, but the results are obvious as he bisects the man's skull. Before the fresh corpse can hit the floor, Kiku is swapped out once more. Binder. Chrome yells out as both parties rush each other, Chrome charges toward La while Hawks has his sights on Kiku. Heroes versus villains, a bloody battle begins. End chapter. Pat. Re in 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. 23 comments 0 vote. Chapter 005 Critical Wounds. Read auxiliary chapter world info before starting the story. Discord. Web links. Pat. Re in 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. Chapter start. Rushing toward Chrome, the massive metal-plated brute, La glances at Hawk, seeing the hero rocket toward his mother, swords in hand and 36 small feathers flying alongside him like sentient knives. Direct confrontation isn't our specialty, assassination is, La thinks, his mind racing 1,000 miles a minute to solve this problem. I need to save as many tricks as possible in case they have reinforcements on the way, and I need to deal with Chrome quickly before Mom gets overwhelmed by those feathers. She can't defend from all angles but also can't hurt Chrome, damn it. Both pairs separate slightly and break into individual duels. Chrome punches down at La with a massive metal fist, only for the swordsman to pivot and turn his back to the hero. Shambles. Clang. Blade clashes against metal skin as they swap places and La slashes at his back. A large gash is left on the hero's back, but it draws no blood. La leaps away as Chrome swings back to swat him. Damn power types, La internally groans. Being an assassin, he rarely, if ever, comes into confrontation with a power type, and certainly not one that's in the top 20 Japanese hero ranking. La tries to aim the point of his sword at Chrome to attack his insides with a force bullet, but the hero closes the distance between the two quickly. Shining Fist. Chrome yells out, his dazzling metallic fist striking Law's sword, sending a wave of numbness up Law's arms as it knocks him across the roof. Law rolls across the ground, then looks up just in time. Shining stomp. Chrome yells as he descends onto Law, aiming to stomp on the assassin. Idiot heroes are always yelling. Law internally groans as he swaps places with Chrome. Law fell a few feet to the roof and landed on his feet while Chrome suddenly appeared on the roof instead of falling, leaving a small crack because of his momentum. As Chrome realizes what happened, he rushes Law, but the assassin was already a few meters away with his sword raised high. Injection shot. He commands while Chrome charges. Arg. Chrome collapses with a heavy clank, cracking and chipping the concrete roof. Law had aimed for his thigh, tearing through the artery and tendon without breaking the skin. The hero collapsed in pain as his fleshy insides were shredded. Chrome grits his teeth and makes an erratic, mad dash toward Law, realizing what had happened and making it difficult for the boy to aim. Injection shot. The shoulder. Injection shot. The gut. Injection shot. The brain, finally killing the hero. Clang. Chrome's forehead slams against the concrete as Law turns toward Hawks and his mother. What he sees makes his blood run cold, but only for a moment, before it begins to boil. During Hawk's short but lethal battle with Kiku, the assassin showed her decades of experience. During one of their clashes she slashed Hawk's face, cracking his visor and nearly destroying his right eye. Ah! He groaned, the feathers on his back pulling him away from her as he thrust his arms forward. All the feathers on his back react and lash out, 4 dozen small blades shredding the assassin. Kiku freezes, eyes wide as she looks down at her own body, as if she'd been sentenced to death via firing squad. There were almost more holes than solid flesh on her torso. Understanding what just happened, Hawks leaps forward with both his swords, taking advantage of this moment to eliminate her before anything unexpected happened. As both his blades were about to make contact, however. Mom! He hears before he disappears. Slashing at the empty air in front of him when he appears at the far side of the roof. Looking down at Chrome's body at his feet, no blood or visible damage of any kind, presumably unconscious, the hero couldn't tell that his dear friend was already dead. Turning around, he sees Law cradling Kiku as she takes what he expects to be her final breaths. His feathers tore through her and danced around inside her torso, putting all her organs into a crude blender. She was dead, she had to be, right? Booster shot. 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 Law screams over and over, his palm over her heart, and faint blue energy transfers from him into her. Unlike Recovery Girl's world-famous heal quirk, instead of using the patient's stamina to force cell activation, Law uses his own stamina to regenerate their bodies. Thankfully his quirk had his body adapt to have much more energy than an average person. She's gone, Hawks says, walking up to Law with his feathers hovering around him, both feather swords still in his hands. Surrender now, enough people have died today. Looking at his mother as she struggles to survive, Law feels rage like never before, not toward Hawks, not toward this situation, only rage at himself. Looking up, his wide-eyed and pissed-off gaze clashes with Hawks'. He puts on a brave front, but using that much energy to keep her alive had his stamina greatly diminished. His room had shrunk from 200 meters down to just barely 50 meters, but the steady, weak, but steady beat of her heart beneath his palm was well worth it. Now I just need to get us out of here so I can operate and save her, Law decided as he gently places her down, rising to his feet, sword in hand. Hawks sighs, I see, so it's like that. Law immediately rushes the hero. Hawks rockets forward, flanked by a dozen feathers on each side, ready to bombard Law with an indefensible onslaught. Before they clash, Law shrinks his room, even more, to barely the size of this whole rooftop. Removing all the unnecessary clutter from his awareness, he focuses entirely on Hawks and all the feathers flying about. Shambles. Clang. Law's blade clashes with Hawks, and the hero's eyes widen, realizing Law had swapped places with a feather at his side. Shambles. Clang. This time Hawks barely reacts fast enough, blocking a slash intended for his back, his feathers heightening his senses and awareness to react nearly as fast as Law, but not quite fast enough to really block anything. But Law had to allow him to block some. Shambles. Clang. Hawks lifts both swords and meets Law's strike to his left side, pushing back against Law. His confidence was built up enough. Shambles. Hawks reacts, and Law once again allows him to defend, blocking with both his feather swords crossed directly in front of him. And as their blades meet. Amputate. Law's sword delivers a slash that separates matter, taking advantage of Hawks' confidence in his ability to parry. The hero's eyes widen in horror as his feather swords are cleanly sliced through. Incision. After Law's blade breaks Hawks' guard, he changes the type of slash he performs. Switching from amputate, which harmlessly divides organic matter, to incision, which increases the physical and destructive property of his slash. The moment his blade makes contact with the hero's armored chest plate, it sinks nearly an inch deep. Hawks doesn't even register the searing pain until after all his feathers instinctively yank him backward. The slash that would have cut his heart in two and ended his career right there instead only sank an inch deep before his body was pulled back by his feathers. From his left shoulder to nearly his right hip, Law's blade leaves a trail of blood and pain across his chest as all the available feathers slam into the hero and rocket away from the roof with him in tow. The blood that sprayed out of Hawks' chest in his retreat splashed across Law's mask. The normal obsessively hygienic surgeon doesn't even pay it any mind as the hero retreats. Law doesn't bother to chase or even continue his assault. He drops his sword and runs back toward where his mother lays, fighting to desperately cling to life. Dropping to his knees beside her, he cradles her in his arms and places a hand on her chest. Booster shot, he begs his quirk to heal her, and the blue light flows from his palm into her torso. Her broken, ragged breathing and irregular heartbeat don't change. Faint and barely there if at all. Room. Law commands, expanding his room, creating the largest room he could to get them out of here. He needed his operating tools. He needed life support devices. He needed home. He says in an exhausted voice, shambles. Both he and his mother disappeared from the rooftop. End chapter. Pat. Re and 5 chapters ahead, Keanu_Eugene. 27 comments, 0 vote. Chapter 006, A Miracle. Read auxiliary chapter world info before starting the story. Discord. Web links. Pat. Re and 5 chapters ahead, Keanu_Eugene. Chapter start. Dad. Law screams, suddenly appearing in the operating room of their clinic. Kiku struggles to breathe as he holds her in his arms, rushing to place her on the operating table. Leaving his mask on, Hawks' blood drying and sticking the cotton to his face, ignored, he flicks his wrist and a scalpel appears in his hand. Tearing off her top, he sees dozens of stab wounds, tunnels made by feathers flying straight through her and exiting her back. Fuck. He gets to work immediately. A minute later, Corazon barges into the room, the clinic thankfully already closed for the day, allowing them to have privacy. The man he sees, his wife on the operating table, an oxygen mask on her face, struggling to keep her eyes open. Thankfully, Law's quirk allows him to perform painless operations. He sees Law with a blood-stained mask, carefully but quickly operating on his mother, both hands in her chest cavity. Crap, Corazon rushes to put on some gloves and join his son at the table. The slow and steady beeping of her heart monitor feels like sirens in his ears. What hap? His question halts as they both freeze. Law carefully removes one of Hawks' feathers and lifts it up. It still subtly shakes as he holds it between them. They both share a knowing look before his father speaks. You need to get out of here, I'll keep her stable. No. Law argues, tossing the feather aside and delving back into the surgery. If I leave, she'll die. He destroyed her organs. Corazon stops himself, knowing Hawks could likely hear them with that feather. Son, you need to go. No, just focus on saving her. Go. Kiku forces herself to speak, her eyes meeting Law's for a moment before she begins to pass out, her heart rate quickly plummeting. Fuck. Law makes a fist with each hand, leaving his thumbs sticking out, and placed them atop her chest, counter shock. His hands spark. Ah. She jolts back awake, heart rate returning as he generated a current with his hands to act as a defibrillator. Booster shot. He gives her another dose of blue healing energy before he continues operating, paying his dad no mind. Looking between his son and wife, Corazon flattens his lips, knowing exactly how stubborn the boy would be. Fine, the man grits out. You focus on her, I'm making sure you can at least get out of this clean. He rushes out of the room, pulling the antibacterial curtains shut behind him and following their plan. All he had to do was make sure they couldn't track Law, because they all knew that the heroes can't actually hold him in custody. Eyes flickering back to his mother as she passes out, heart rate erratic, Law keeps muttering to himself. I'll fix this, I'll fix this, I'll fix this. Over and over for nearly an hour, before the sirens start approaching. Law feels his mind becoming more and more exhausted by the second. He doesn't react when someone busts open the front door, turning the wood into splinters. The feather at the side of the room rushes through the curtains, but he continues operating on his mother. He hears his father yelling, 3 gunshots, then a body hitting the floor. His quirk allowed him to know what was going on. His father was fine, but none of his shots had hit, not surprising for a non-combatant. When the curtains are ripped open he sees Hawks staring at him with hate-filled eyes. His entire chest is bloodied, one arm across his chest while the other holds a feather sword. His red feather wings kept him off the ground to ease the pressure on his chest. Surrender, now. Hawks demands. Law's eyes focus on Hawks for a moment, seeing the sweat on the hero's face and the way he was careful with his injury, the venom in his glare, and most importantly, all the feathers already surrounding him and his mother. Law returns his focus to his mother, and continues operating. If I stop she dies, was all he said. She's already dead, Hawks insisted. I put her damn organs in a blender, it'd take a miracle to save her, and you killed my friend. So get on the ground, now. I can heal her, I am a miracle, just need time, Law says flatly. Hawks takes a more aggressive stance, feathers angling themselves to cut Law into pieces. Law ignores him, unwilling to ever leave his mother to die, so he continues operating. Fine, Hawks mutters, telepathically instructing his feathers to attack. 2 feathers tear into Law's legs, trying to make him kneel. He groans, but his arms and hands stay steady, his legs through sheer will remain standing, refusing to stop working on his mother. Fine, Hawks says, but you asked for this. 1 long feather rockets directly to Law's neck, nearly piercing the skin before it stops, and through it all, he continues operating. What? Hawks screams, holding his earpiece. He obeyed the order to stop his attack but couldn't understand why. What the hell could you ever need him for? He growls out. Law listens in on the conversation, at least on Hawks' side, but doesn't stop operating, doesn't even bother to move the feather from his neck. Hawks grits his teeth and is seething at the sight of Law. This monster killed Chrome and you want me to wait? Dash dash dash. Who's to say he won't just warp away? We won't get this chance again. Hawks argues. Dash dash dash. You can't be serious. You expect him to honor that? Dash dash dash. Fine. But if he gets away this is on your head Nezu, this entire trap was yours anyway, Hawks grumbles. Law notices the feathers returning to Hawks' wings, the steady beep of Kiku's heart monitor is the only sound in the room for almost a minute. She's your mom? Hawks asks. Yes, Law answers surprisingly quickly. Hawks sighs, can't believe I'm saying this, you can finish working on her if you agree to come with me afterward, and we'll keep you up to date on her status, we just want to ask you a few questions. Deal, Law doesn't even hesitate, not with how much is at stake. Task Force Control Unit. Within a nearby apartment, Nezu a 90 centimeters or 3 feet tall white bear mouse with a scar across his right eye, wearing a pristine 3-piece suit sits at a computer desk. Through Hawks' body camera he's been seeing and hearing everything since the beginning of this operation. He's now more thankful than ever that aside from the security posted outside only 3 pros knew about this operation, keeping it as insulated as possible was the key to catching Arsenal. Looking at the 3 computer screens in front of him he sees Law still steadily working on saving Arsenal, and on a separate camera, he sees the Heart Thief Corazon being loaded into an armored truck outside. Picking up his phone from the desk he looks at the time, nearly 9 p.m., yet he doesn't even hesitate to make the call. It only rings once before a pleasant voice answers him, Nezu. What's going on? I'm about to make a big drug bust. This is more important than that Naomasa, Nezu says. I'm sending you an audio recording, use your lie detector quirk, if it's legit then get over here immediately to cover for me, I'll need to go see President Pantu. Huh. What's this about? Naomasa Tsukauchi asks, now much more concerned, especially if Nezu would have to go see Pantu, the president of the Hero Public Safety Commission. I think I found our friend a doctor. Nezu hears Naomasa choke at the other end of the call. Send the recording, Naomasa immediately demands. Already sent. Nezu leans back in his chair, paw pads nervously tapping the desk. Even with his quirk high spec giving him, a simple bear mouse, intelligence beyond human comprehension, capable of outpacing the most advanced supercomputers, he never expected to stumble upon such a miracle, assuming this was real. But all the evidence points to it being real. The constant beeping of Arsenal's heart monitor was evidence that this was a real miracle, something they'd been searching the past 4 years for. Hawks definitely shredded all her internal organs, if he can save her. Maybe he can even heal All Might. The bear mouse dared to hope. Feeling his phone vibrate, Nezu answers before it can even start ringing, Naomasa. It's real. Naomasa's winded voice answers back. I'm running to my car now, send me your location then go talk to Pantu. Alright, Nezu hops down from the chair and begins walking to the exit. When you get here make sure to keep his mask on, we need all the leverage we can get. The current date is April 5, 2114, 1 year until Deku's first day at UA, and 2 months until he meets All Might. End chapter. Pat. Re in 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. 56 comments 0 vote. Chapter 007 Negotiations Point. 1. Read auxiliary chapter world info before starting the story. Discord. Web links. Pat. Re in 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. Chapter start. Nearly 10 p.m. and you've got me here still, this had better be good Nezu. Pantu says sharply, narrowing her eyes at the bear mouse seating across from her desk. In the sleek minimalist office of the Hero Public Safety Commission president, she leans back into her chair. Her short ash blonde hair slicked back neatly, pearls around her neck. Black dress and suit jacket combination neat as ever. Slight wrinkles on her face showed her age but she still held a vibrant sort of vigor in her turquoise eyes. I'll make this quick so you can get to the airport, Nezu says. I need full negotiating power on the Arsenal case. Denied. Get out. I can't do that, Nezu says. Something happened and now the situation has changed. Pantu raises a brow at him, understanding that he wouldn't ask for such a thing without a very good and well thought out reason. What on earth could make you want to potentially give that monster a pardon? She's killed thousands of people, and dozens of heroes, she should be in the ground already, that's why I gave you Hawks and Chrome, they're not opposed to more definitive measures. It's not for her, Nezu says. Pantu leans back into her chair and raises a hand to her chin, I'll delay my jet, start from the top. Nezu looks around the office for a moment before clearing his throat. This made Pantu even more interested. She sits up and taps a button below her desk, shutting off all the recording devices in the room. Alright, off the record, now from the top. The plan worked perfectly, Nezu says. Any of the jobs she took for the next few months would have set off our trap, but we encountered an unexpected complication. How unexpected? Apparently the heart thief in Arsenal had a baby, Nezu sighs. This gets Pantu leaning forward. Wait, did he? Nezu nods. For her. He nods again. My god, to think those two monsters were connected all along. Like I said, most unexpected. She gestures for him to continue and relaxes back into her chair. We lost Shifter, Nezu says. How? His skin is supposed to be as hard as tungsten when he transforms. True, Nezu says. We chose him and Chrome for that express purpose. They can block anything Arsenal's QUIRK has while Hawks is fast enough to subdue her, but we didn't prepare for her son. He did something to Shifter, same as Chrome. It's as if a bullet tore through them, didn't even touch the skin, only internal components. An indefensible attack? Pantu asks. And he can warp, with undefined limitations. Pantu groans. Warping quirks were near impossible to deal with short of a shock implant, but getting approval for those were an entirely different humanitarian issue, yet it always seems like only villains ever get warping quirks. Currently, no hero in the world has one, that's simply how rare they were. What do you mean undefined limitation? It's the first and only instant warping quirk to my knowledge, Nezu says. He can swap the place of objects or people at will or seemingly move freely without needing to swap with anything. We've seen conflicting evidence, there are clearly factors we aren't aware of. Alright, go on. He used this substitution-based warping to kill Mindbender by swapping him with Arsenal before swapping them back. He was able to resist the telepathic connection when Arsenal couldn't, and he somehow located Mindbender with no information. 3 dead pros, all from the top 20, Pantu frowns. Is Hawks alright? He barely survived their first encounter. After Hawks destroyed Arsenal's organs her son almost cut him in half, but Hawks was fast enough to escape before bleeding out. He got stapled up before we made the arrest. Hawks, the number 3 pro hero, had to run. The boy is very well trained as you can imagine, certainly not the first time he's crossed swords with someone. How do you arrest him if he can warp? She asks. We tracked them with a feather. Hawks left in Arsenal. He was performing surgery on his mom when we got there. If he left she would have died, so I made him a deal. He can finish the operation if he surrenders quietly. She survived? Pantu asked. Somehow, Nezu says. His operating skills and healing ability are a miraculous combination, certainly his father's son. Pantu raises a brow at this. Healing? Nezu nods. Another ability he has. Hawks confirmed the kind of damage she sustained. She should have been dead 10 times over, but she's stable and in custody as we speak. And the boy? I heard over the phone on the way here that he kept his word. And the heart thief? He shot at Hawks but was easily subdued without hurting anyone, including himself. He did manage to destroy all their records before we got there, sadly. Damn, Pantu rubs her face and sighs. So two monsters made an even worse monster with however many abilities and some strange quirk, and you want what exactly? I have someone I need him to heal, I already have his psychosis solved, I know how to handle him, and if I don't, it'll only take one conversation to figure him out. Pantu shakes her head. Sorry Nezu, but I'm not letting that hero-killing kid back into the public, starting thinking of a way to put cuffs on him that he can't warp out of. Pantu, it's in the best interest of Japan that he accepts this offer, and you're the person with the authority to grant it. Pantu sighs. Who could be so important that you need this kid to heal? Just have recovery girl do it. We tried, Nezu says. We've been trying for years with some of the best healers around the world, everyone says it's impossible to even extend his time, Japan isn't ready to stand without its symbol Pantu. Pantu nearly feels her heart stop at those words, why you can't mean. Yes, Nezu nods solemnly, this is our best hope, for All Might. Damn it, Pantu sighs. You understand all the things those two monsters have done, right? Nezu nods. So you know how much international pressure will be on me to sentence them to execution in Tartarus. He nods again. Sigh, I'll agree with whatever deal you make so long as it doesn't mean they all walk, at least not immediately, when things are more quiet in a few years I can get them out. You can give the kid a full pardon if you really think he's worth the risk. It's hard to imagine a risk not worth taking for the potential to save All Might. Why'd you keep this information from me anyway? Pantu asks. Can you tell me any more? I'm afraid not, I've already told you far more than I was ever allowed to, but I'm sure you'll understand. Pantu nods. Well, your connections are better than mine, so if you couldn't find a solution I certainly couldn't have. What about the kid, what's your endgame with him, after he potentially fixes All Might? All Might is already 48 years old, even if he was in perfect health, how much longer could we rely on him? Pantu scowls, you know the Constitution and international hero law states we can't give a license to anyone that doesn't complete a hero course, she reminds him. I'm well aware of that, and I'm also aware that every country breaks that regulation, just as you've done for Hawks and a few others. They were raised to protect Japan and her interests at all costs, I'm not giving your pet monster the same benefits as them. That would likely be for the best, he already has the skills to deal with most heroes and villains, but he lacks that heroic spirit, and I know the perfect place to instill that into him, Nezu smiles victoriously. Pantu shakes her head, you plan to put that thing in a classroom and tell it to play nice with the other children. I plan to show him the virtuous and heroic path, and all the good he can do, but yes, placing him in a hero-centric environment for a few years is sure to help. Pantu shakes her head, just don't come crying to me when he puts a knife in your back, it's inevitable when someone is as hopeful as you are, which really doesn't make sense considering you're the smartest person on the planet by such a large margin. Nezu can't help but laugh at that, maybe the people arguing with the smartest creature to ever live are wrong, I find that much more likely, he'll be a great hero, you'll see. End chapter. Pat. Re in 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. 54 comments 0 vote. Chapter 008 Negotiations Point. 2. Read auxiliary chapter world info before starting the story. Discord. Web links. Pat. Re in 5 chapters ahead Keanu_Eugene. Chapter start. Standing in a small room with a control panel in front of him, Tsukauchi has his arms folded across his chest. Wearing a bulletproof vest and his raid equipment, he has a small frown on his face as he stares at the glass in front of him. Aside from the small door and control panel, the only feature of this room was the one-way mirror built into the wall. It allowed him to see La on the other side, sitting on a metal chair that was bolted to the floor, locked in a room and hands cuffed to the metal table in front of him that was also bolted down. Staring at the villain, Tsukauchi racked his brain trying to make sense of this situation, feeling a creeping sense of dread as La's blue-white eyes seemed to stare through him. Click. Tsukauchi is startled out of his thoughts as Nezu enters the viewing room. Oh, it's you. Expecting someone else? Nezu asked. The mouse bear had a stack of documents tucked under his arm. Yeah, Tsukauchi sighs, figured Hawks would come in again to yell at me, what happened? Everything went well, although I had to reveal exactly who we want him to operate on. Nezu raises a paw to stop Tsukauchi's response, nothing more than a name, I assure you, not that I could lie to someone with your quirk anyway. Tsukauchi turns back to face La and glares at the villain, so what now? HMPH, Nezu jumps up to the control panel, with some help from Tsukauchi. Standing on it he can finally see into the room, and he notices La's head shift. Eyes moving from Tsukauchi and onto him. Can he see through the mirror? All I know is he can't hear us. Nezu waves playfully, and Law raises his fingers in a bored gesture, hands still cuffed to the table. Both their eyes widen slightly at that. Or maybe he can see us, Tsukauchi says. But again, what's the plan? First catch me up to speed, give me the rundown of what happened after I left the operation, Nezu says. Right. We locked up the heart thief first, we shipped him off to Tartarus immediately, Hawks supervised the surgery and when it was complete I followed your instructions and had the kid brought here. Arsenal is stable, somehow, the doctors at Central Hospital are looking over her, but from what they've said so far, he really did perform a miracle on her. Nezu rubs his chin. So his dad is in the most secure prison in the world and his mom is soon to follow, and thanks to the hero and villain laws we can skip a trial if someone poses a sufficient threat or containment risk to civilians. That leaves this young man in a tough spot. From my assessment, he's likely 15, if so much, that would match up to the dip Arsenal had in her contracts at that time. What about the boy after I left? Nothing, Tsukauchi says. Didn't resist, or speak, just made sure nobody took off his mask and did everything I said. I expected that much, Nezu says. And the documents? His dad burned everything they had on file, and set the entire building ablaze in the process. Pictures, contracts, contacts, any work history, IDs, don't even know what he looks like under there, Tsukauchi gestures to Law's bloodied mask. All we've got to go on is what your program got. I see. It seems my assessment of his mind was spot on, this shouldn't take long at all, Nezu hops off the control panel and down to the floor. Do tell me if he says any lies, Tsukauchi. Yeah, but don't you want to call in Hawks or some more officers before you talk to him? Nezu stops walking toward the door and turns back to Tsukauchi, he chuckles and shakes his head, I've already sent them all away, only we three are here, don't worry, we'll be fine. Nezu adjusts his earpiece and exits the room, making a small detour to prepare something before speaking to the masked villain. Sitting in the interrogation room, Law was remarkably calm. Who wouldn't be when you could leave at any time? He made a game of staring at the detective through the mirror. Using his quirk and his scan technique to get a 3D image of the man's movements, constantly keeping his eyes locked on him. While he kept his composure, his mind was making hundreds of contingencies. He'd have to leave and immediately go to Central Hospital to get his mother, but she'd be on life support so he wouldn't be able to move her in his exhausted state. His dad would already be in Tartarus, and they'd surely take measures against a jailbreak, even if he can warp the results would likely be bloody. So in the meantime, he knew he was stuck. After waiting for quite a while, however, things began changing. Most of the security is leaving, and Hawks, he notices, scanning the room again to make sure what he sensed in the building was true. Feeling one short figure approaching, he knew exactly what was going on. Nezu is here in person, this must be a big deal. Click. The door swings open as Nezu walks in, the unmistakable mark of confidence in his steps. Hopping onto the metal chair opposite Law, he has his back to the mirrored panel and places two things on the metal table. A stack of documents, and a plastic bottle of water, just simple water that can be bought anywhere, with a little something extra in it. Law's eyes never leave Nezu, even as the man silently observes him, and they size each other up. Breaking the silence, Nezu waves, Hi there, I know who you are. Smartest creature to ever live, helped countries restructure governments and infrastructure. Wrote hero laws across the world, principal of UA, Law says. I was waiting for you. My reputation precedes me. Anyone who has anything to do with heroes should know you, not knowing who the #1 hero supporter is would be idiotic. Nezu nods along, very true for your line of work, and you said you were waiting for me. I only talked to the man in charge, and you ordered Hawks to stop, so you're the man in charge, right? Nezu nods, realizing that Law had been listening to Hawks earlier, that I am. And would you care to guess why I'm here? To give me a shady deal, Law looks around at the room. Would explain why I'm in some private building instead of a police station. Very perceptive, Nezu says. And what may I call you? Doctor, Law says. Very well, Doctor. Both your parents are currently in Tartarus, measures are naturally being taken against any warping jailbreak. Nezu sees Law stiffen at those words, although he tried to hide it. I shouldn't have to tell you that those countermeasures include very messy results should they be triggered. I'm aware, Law says with much more grit than intended. Such measures are necessary considering the severity of your parents' crimes, Nezu says. A natural-born prodigy moving from Italy to Japan to become a doctor at only 20, gets called in to operate on a modern Japanese princess. And instead of the simple stomach surgery, he cuts out her heart and disappears. Nezu's words don't affect Law at all, he shows no surprise or shame. And Arsenal, Nezu says. To think he stole the heart for her, for love, to keep her alive. A woman credited with nearly 7,000 confirmed kills, many of which are on very influential people. I'm sure you can understand the situation they're in right now, yes. Execution, Law says. Nezu nods, and you could very well join them, if we could contain you, which we can't. Certainly not with only 2 of you, Law says. Both Nezu and Tsukauchi stiffen at that, unsure how he knew that everyone else had gone, but this was all planned for. It would make no difference, Nezu shrugs. The people we had couldn't stop you from leaving anyway, so at least this way you don't have to hurt them. Besides, the fact that you're still here and knew I came with a deal proves you're smart enough to know what choice is best, and you understand the leverage I have. Law grits his teeth. My parents aren't leverage, he says. My apologies, but surely you understand what I mean, yes? Law nods. Well then, doctor, here is the situation. I need your skills for one job, then you're completely free to go. I'll never come looking for you unless you do something to get on my radar, and you'll have no connection to the heart thief or Arsenal. Services. Law asks, you need me to kill or heal someone? Heal. And what about my parents? Nezu hesitates for a moment. Nezu reaches for one of the documents and places it in front of him, reading it to Law. If you sign this, it will state that you were groomed without choice in an abusive house. Shut up. Law's yell causes Nezu to reel back on his chair. You ever talk about my parents like that again and all the heroes in the world wouldn't be able to save you. Law suddenly went from calm to seething with rage. Nezu takes a deep breath, says, I understand, and pretends like it never happened. Tossing that offer aside, along with a few others. I assume you'll never testify against them in any way. Correct, Law says. I love my parents, and I'm proud of them. They taught me everything they knew and made me who I am. I owe them everything. I'll never turn on them, and I won't let anyone talk bad about them, got it? Understood, Nezu says, nodding and moves on to new documents. Would you like some of the water? Cling. Nezu looks up to see Law sitting back and cracking the seal on the bottle, empty handcuffs on the table, no longer running through the metal bar built atop the table. He'd swapped the cuffs and water, causing them to disappear from around his wrist as the water appeared in his hand. Tsukauchi wasted no time in telling Nezu what happened as Law leans back and takes a large gulp of water. Nezu only stares for a moment before turning back to the documents as if nothing happened, not at all bothered by the villain sitting across from him without restraints. Ignoring Tsukauchi yelling in his earpiece about how he should get out of there. As Law finishes the bottle of water, Nezu begins speaking. All right, I've found a solution to both our problems. He pauses, seeing a thoughtful expression in Law's eyes as he seems to be mulling over some thoughts. Without warning, Law looks away and up down his mask slightly, spitting into the corner of the room before turning back to Nezu, mask back on properly to only show his eyes. A biological tracker, very clever, Law says, a hint of amusement in his voice. Tsukauchi's voice buzzes in Nezu's earpiece. He really did spit out the tracker, every little bit of it. The detective says in a mix of horror and amazement. Nezu can't help but lean back in his chair. I designed that to meld with prisoners' bodies so we can keep tabs on slippery villains. How'd you find it, much less expel it? Law only shrugs in response. Nezu sighs, still calm and focused. Law's attitude is still well within the predicted margins for him. I've come up with a new deal that doesn't involve you betraying your parents. Community service. What? Law asks, completely confused. Quite simple really. Nezu takes one of the documents from the bottom of the stack and slides it over so Law can read it. You get a full pardon, their executions are withheld, and when your side of the agreement is complete we can even discuss reducing their sentence, depending on how well you do at community service of course. Law looks up from the contract in front of him, more like a piece of paper with one signature on it. Hero Public Safety Commission President Pantu herself, the highest authority in Japan aside from President Bozu, but in terms of hero matters, she was the head in most cases. What's the community service? Law asks. Nezu smiles and reaches forward in a handshake gesture. Come study at UA, and be a hero. End chapter. Pat. Re and 5 chapters ahead. Keanu _Eugene. 57 comments 0 vote. Chapter